And one of the people that help people find their personal stories is one of the people who helped create this day is Sarina Roffe. She doesn't need too much introduction, but I'm going to read a little bit. She's a career journalist and holds a BA in journalism, an MA in Jewish studies, and an MBA. She's the editor of Dorot for JGS of New York, the author of Branching Out from Sepharad, Backyard Kitchen, Mediterranean Salads, and Backyard Kitchen, the main course. Sarina speaks often and has written hundreds of articles. She has researched numerous genealogies and is considered an expert in Syrian Jewry. She is the one that people seek out when they're trying to find their Syrian genealogy, and we're privileged to hear from her today.
Thank you, and thank you for those of you who are staying. I know it's the end of the day and you're tired, but I want to thank Ben because Ben's presentation just now is actually a good segue into my own presentation. What is it, the green one here? Okay. I'm not going to go into a lot of the Syrian Jewish history because I think you've heard it all. You've heard about the history of the thousands of years of being in Syria. And you've heard also about the pogroms, so I'm going to kind of skip ahead on that. And I know it's late in the day. After the 1947 pogroms, a lot of people were leaving. But Syria is different than the other Arab countries in that Syria locked its doors. So instead of allowing Jews to leave, Syria said, no, you're staying. And part of that staying was that they had to not travel more than 3 kilometers from their home. Their businesses were boycotted. They were expelled from jobs. Their civil rights were limited. And what happened was that the Jews of Syria became prisoners in their own country. And even if you had citizenship from another country, let's say you had Lebanese citizenship, you still weren't allowed to leave because it was believed you were going to go to Israel, and from Israel you would fight against Syria. And so you were considered a combatant. And so Jews, if they wanted to travel abroad, they had to leave people behind. They had to pay a ransom. So all of this goes to the fact that people wanted to then escape. And the first people to escape were young men because they were single, or young girls because they were single, not married, therefore not having the same ties. And if you left, if you were going to escape, then you escaped with the clothes on your back, you escaped with a smuggler, and there were certain paths to escape. And that's really what I'd like to focus on now. Just talked about the oppression and people being smuggled out. This is a story of one person. You heard about Ben told us about the 4 girls who were murdered. I'll tell you about another. This quote is from actually a guy named Henry Abadi. I said Maurice, but his name is Henry Abadi because he told me I can go public. And he says, as a Jew growing up in Aleppo in the 50s and 60s, I endured every imaginable type of persecution, religious, social, professional, and personal. I endured the humiliation of a 10 p.m. curfew and rejection from public events. I was compelled to look at a pests not allowed sign, which included a caricature of a hook-nosed Jew. My wishes were simple: to walk freely through the streets, to carry an ID that doesn't bear a red stamp, a religious badge, much like East Europe's Judean Yellow Star of David, to taste Coca-Cola and to learn history from uncensored books. I longed for the freedoms that I imagined others took for granted, the ones I heard about on Voice of America, my radio access to the other world across the sea. I dreamed of using the university degree I worked so hard to earn. One day I said, I shall not be denied the same employments that my Muslim and Christian counterparts so easily secured. So I want to just tell you about Henry. Henry had a brother, Victor. Victor was married to a woman named Lillian Antiby. And one day, Victor gets a phone call in his office, and he says, why are you home? Don't you know what happened to your wife? And he runs home and he finds his wife, pregnant wife, disemboweled, his 2 children murdered. And I interviewed Dr. Samuel Bakar, who's a pediatrician in Brooklyn. His father was a doctor in Aleppo at the time, and he went with his father to see the bodies and to see them dead. Horrible, horrible tortures. The Germans had come in and taught them torture chambers. I mean, the life of these Jews, we call them the Jews of despair. So people wanted to escape. So this is a map that kind of shows Damascus and Aleppo. Now, if you see the mountains, you see Damascus is very close to Lebanon. So if you're from Damascus, you most likely went over the border into Lebanon and got to Beirut, where the Jewish community of Beirut had to figure out how to get you to Israel. And there were a few ways that they did that. If you were from Aleppo, or if you were from Kamishli, which was a smaller border town, you might have gone to Beirut, but you most likely would have gone over the border into Turkey. And you would have gone to Iskenderun, which is where the Shemosh family had set up shop. So let me just explain a little bit more, okay? So from 1948 till about 1961, Shula Cohen, AKA the Pearl, was a Mossad spy who did missions for Mossad, but also helped thousands and thousands of Jews who were escaping Syria and Iraq get over the border into Israel. Now, they had to go south through Hezbollah territory to get over the border into Syria, but after a while, that became too dangerous. So what did they do? They started going the sea route. The sea route meant that they went out by boat, and my cousin Isaac told me that when they went out in rowboats of 4 to 6 people, and they'd go out about 3 miles into the Mediterranean when the Israelis would surface and pick them up and then take them to Haifa. So that route also became a route. I have later stories of people who went through Cyprus, and then from Cyprus to Israel, where the ferry to Cyprus would get stopped and the Israelis would pick them up. So the Jewish Agency was heavily involved in helping these people who were escaping. In 1961, Shula Cohen was arrested for treason, and she was jailed by Lebanon. Albert Aliyah was the secretary of the community, and he continued to help. But then he was taken off of the streets of Beirut by the Mukhabarat in 1971 on his way to work, and never heard from again. So that's Beirut. Now let's go to Iskenderun. If you were going over the mountains into Turkey, you would arrive at the house of Harun Shamash. Now, Harun Shamash's father was a rabbi, and he actually was the beginning of the whole of the escapes. And people would show up at their door at 2 and 3 in the morning, filthy, dirty, having gone through the snow, freezing, and they would have to take care of these families. And they made arrangements with the Jewish Agency to get them to Istanbul. And from Istanbul, they got to Israel. And we're lucky enough today to have Mr. Shemosh with us. And so I'd like to call up Harun Shamash to say a few words. Mr. Shamash is a real hero. He's credited with over 3,000 people, he and his family, over 3,000 people coming to Israel and to America. Mr. Shamash?
Good afternoon. I am sorry if my English not very well. I speak only Hebrew. Okay. אני, שם שלי אהרון שמוש אימיר. אני נולדתי באסקנדרון, גבול חלב.
I was born in Iskanderun on the border of Haleb.
My father, זיכרונו לברכה, ב-1932, 1932, מחלב שלחו אותו לאסקנדרון, חכם, חזן ושוחט.
So he was sent to Iskanderun
My
in
father.
his father, in you said that, 1932, to be a
איסקנדרון. to Iskenderun.
To Iskenderun?
באסקנדרון אותו זמן היה 360 יהודים.
There were 360 Jews there, and they needed a chazan and a slaughterer and a Moab.
אסקנדרון הייתה שייכת לסוריה, אבל היה הממשל צרפת.
It was under the French governance.
כן. ב-1938, 1938, טורקים נכנסו לשם ועשו רפרנדום, 51 לקחו הטורקים כבשו את אסקנדרון.
So the Turkish in 1938 came in and there was a referendum, and they, with 51 mandates, they took over.
הייתה נם של זה היה אסקנדרון וילאייתה, אז היה אחד חכם באסקנדרון ב-38, אז אמר זה היה מדינה מיוחדת שנה בשם התאי. איפה, מה זה התאי? מהיטית, מהתורה שלנו היטית, שמו את השם המקום הזה, התאי וילאייתה.
So they called the place Hatay Vilayete after the Hittites from the Bible.
After 1 year, לקחו את זה טורקיה. ואבא שלי, זיכרונו לברכה, היה חכם, היה פותח את בית הכנסת והכל, אז בשנת 40 התחילו לבוא מאירופה ללכת לפלסטין. איך הולכים? באים בים, באים לאסקנדרון, מאסקנדרון לחלב, בביירות, והולכים לשם.
So in 1940 they would come through the...
אבא היה, זיכרונו לברכה, עוזר לאנשים שבאים מאירופה ללכת לפלסטין.
So in 1940 they would come by sea through Iskanderun, and his father would help them escape through Aleppo and into British Mandate Palestine.
אני לא רוצה להגדיל את זה, בקיצור אני אומר, אחרי מדינת ישראל, התחילו לבוא מחלב, מסוריה, דמשק וקמשלי לאסקנדרון. הרבה מהם, 90% לא היה להם דרכונים, לא היה שום דבר. היינו מסדרים אותם ונשלחים לישראל, והסוכנות נתנה לנו מספר 3,570 איש עברו מהבית שלנו.
So 3,570 people
3,570.
went through their house in Iskanderun from Damascus and from the sea from Europe throughout those years, getting passports only from the Jewish agency because they basically had no identification.
כל הכבוד לאבא שלי, שאבא שלי התחיל, ואני המשכתי אחרי שנפטר אבא שלי 1970, 1970.
And so, kol hakavod to his father. I don't know how wonderful his father was, but in 1970, he took over for his father when his father passed away.
מה שראיתי בבית, המשכתי.
So he continued in his father's legacy when his father passed away in 1970.
ברוך השם שאני, יש לי מזל שעשיתי את כל זה, ובאותו זמן, כל הזמן שבא קונסול לאיסטנבול או שגריר, חייבים יבוא אלינו לבית להכיר את אבא שלי. השגריר הראשון היה שם שלו אליהו ששון. אחר כך בא בן שלו, משה ששון. גם היו בית אצלנו. וברוך השם, כל העזרדנים, כל הגדולים מישראל, הרבה אנשים באו לבית שלנו. למשל, עזרדנין היה סגן משרד החוץ.
So all of the officials from Israel who would come to Istanbul would come and honor them by coming to their house and being welcomed there.
בשנת 95, 1995, זיכרונו לברכה, יצחק רבין, הזמין אותי לישראל לעשות בשבילי משהו.
In 1995, Yitzhak Rabin
אבל
personally invited him to
אוגוסט-
Israel.
היה אוגוסט, אמרתי להם, אני אבוא אחרי חגים.
But he said he'd come only after the holidays in
היא
1995.
נפטר, אני שכחתי מזה, אבל בג'נוארי 1936, שמעון פרס אומר, אני ראיתי את הדוח, בבקשה.
So in 1996, Shimon Peres then saw that he was supposed to be invited, and he was re-invited.
והלכתי בג'נוארי 1996, באו כל הגדולים, כל הקונסולים שעברו באיסטנבול, השגרירים, באו למשרד, היה 200 איש במלון גדול, והשאר לכבודנו, כל המשפחה שלי היינו
So
שם.
200 people gathered in a hotel to honor him and his family for helping them.
לקחנו דברים טובים, הכל, וזה מספר מכתבים ויפה, וגם יש לי תעודת בספר הזהב של קרן קיימת לישראל, נתנו לי.
And
בספר הזהב.
I guess there's a golden book of the JNF, and so he's part of the golden book of the JNF.
סוף סוף איזק הרזוג שמע עליי, הוא שמע, יודע הכל, הזמין אותי להכיר אותי, ובספטמבר 21 הלכתי אליו, והיה לנו 3 שעות איתו, היה יפה מאוד, וזה הכבוד שלי, ואני מתגאה בזה.
So he's very proud that in September 2021, Yitzhak
Herzog.
Herzog, invited him to honor him as well. תודה רבה.
תודה רבה לכולכם.
So I would be remiss in not talking a little bit about Eli Cohen, who was a spy who had been embedded by Mossad in Syria. And it was thought that Eli Cohen was related to Shula Cohen, but they weren't related. The reason is Shula Cohen had been born in Argentina, and Eli Cohen had gone to Argentina to establish his persona. I also wanted to talk about Judy Feld-Carr. Judy Feld-Carr was a musicologist from Canada, and she helped, she ransomed, she bargained for, she negotiated, she helped, she paid bakshish for over 3,000 people to leave Syria. Now, there's some overlap between her and Mr. Shamish because they work together. And actually, her mentor was Shula Cohen. Shula Cohen, who had been arrested for treason in 1961, had been released in a prisoner exchange with Israel in 1967. And Shula Cohen became a mentor to Judy Feld-Carr, who was working to help Jews escape. Now, all these people escape. What happens after they escape? What happens after they leave? They have to be settled. So a final wave of immigration comes in 1992. So what happens is that the USSR breaks down. They need money. Syria has lost military and financial protection from the USSR, and a committee forms in Brooklyn to heavily lobby, because every conversation with Assad was, we want money, and they would say, let your Jews go. And finally, in April 1992, Assad says that the Jews can leave, and now you have to deal with settlement, okay? You have 4,500 Jews in Syria who are all coming by plane loads, financed by Safra, Edmund Safra. He paid lots and lots of money for the plane tickets for those people to come to the United States. He would not allow them to go, Assad would not allow them to go to Israel. They came to the United States, to Brooklyn, and had to be settled. You had help from Nayana, from Hayes, from the Sephardic B'Kor Halim. UJA raised $26 million for settlement. So a lot was going on, and it involved a resurgence of Judeo-Arabic culture in our Brooklyn community. And with that, I will turn it back over to Drora.